Welcome back, Patriots. We're breaking down the oversight investigation and referral documents that Tulsi Gabbard released this morning. I have a lot of highlights for you, and what I did was I read through the entire document, all 46 pages, and extracted supporting quotes that I think are necessary to build the conversation that we're going to have together today. Now, this first page, its purpose is to explain a few things, which we're going to go over right now. This first page explains why the review was necessary in the first place, and it was used to evaluate if the ICA's judgment that Putin preferred Trump was sound and based on proper intelligence standards, and which you're about to find out it wasn't. It shows how comprehensive the review was and that it was launched due to growing concerns that a politically sensitive conclusion may have been based on flawed or misrepresented intelligence. Now, they went and spent 23 hours interviewing the ICA and its source reports. And then in addition to that, 20 interviews were conducted on intelligence officers and FBI agents. Now, we're still on page 1. And what this page also shows is that it offers 3 key recommendations to prevent politically influenced intelligence in the future, which kind of gives you an idea of what we're about to get into. Is what they found was everything was politically influenced, hence why they have its recommendations in the first place. Now, these recommendations suggest serious flaws were found in how the ICA was developed in the first place, particularly the part about Putin favoring Trump, and aim to prevent similar politicization in the future. Now, as we remain on this page, what we see is many ICA judgments were sound, but the claim that Putin preferred Trump did not meet intelligence standards and relied on questionable sources, which we'll get into in one moment. The idea that Putin supported Trump was a cornerstone of the Russiagate narrative that was promulgated by the Obama administration and then puppeted up and supported by the mainstream media. Now, this page here reveals that this conclusion was based on one vague sentence, that alternative explanations were ignored altogether. So basically, there was a fractured piece of a sentence that they looked at and said, we're going to run and just run wild with it, which is an insane idea to push based on one small piece of information. Now, moving into page 2 here, what we find is the ICA's claim that Putin wanted Trump to win failed multiple tradecraft standards, including misrepresenting source quality, ignoring uncertainty, and rushing publication. This page also gets to the heart of the controversy that Putin favored Trump judgment wasn't just weak, it violated intelligence standards and may have been politically motivated or influenced, which I think there's a lot of credibility here that it was in fact politically motivated or influenced. Now, moving on to page 3, what I found was that the ICA failed to disclose that its most sensitive judgments about Putin's intentions were based on raw intelligence that didn't meet tradecraft standards once again. This page also reveals that the most politically charged claim, Putin supported Trump, was built on questionable intelligence that had originally been rejected by professionals for being unreliable. So the ICA failed to acknowledge that key judgments on Putin's intentions were based on raw intelligence that did not meet tradecraft standards. Again, you're going to see this time and time again. CIA officers said that the DCIA ordered the publication of 15 new or revised CIA human reports that the CIA professionals had decided not to publish for various reasons having to do with tradecraft standards, but they decided to publish it anyways, meaning the DCIA. And then 3 contained flawed information, 3 of those 15, and these 3 became the foundational sources the ICA cited to claim Putin aspired to help Trump win, meaning the ones that contained the most flawed information was the ones they used in the most vulnerable way to push out this whole report. Now, on page 4, what was found was one of the key reports used to claim that Putin wanted Trump to win relied on a single, listen carefully, a single unclear sentence fragment, and even CIA officers didn't know what it meant. So there was one key fragment that they pushed this whole thing on and over regarding Putin supporting Trump, which is an insane thing to do from the intelligence community. Again, and even the CIA officers didn't know what it meant, but they still pushed it anyways. This undermines the credibility of the ICA's most headline-grabbing claim. If 5 intelligence officers couldn't agree on the meaning of the sentence, then labeling it as high confidence assessment is intellectually dishonest. Again, it says here, supporting quotes, one scant, unclear, and unverifiable fragment constitutes the only classified information cited to suggest Putin aspired to help Trump win. What you have there is the foundation of this whole thing and why they pushed it, which is wild. Quote, "We don't know what was meant by that, and 5 people read it in 5 different ways, basically. The ICA presented only one interpretation of the unclear fragment without incorporating analysis of alternative explanations whatsoever." Now you're seeing how this is getting a little wild. Now, on page 5, what was found was the ICA not only relied on a vague fragment, it ignored the context warnings that questioned the fragment's reliability in the first place, the source access, and the origin. Basically, you guys, they ignored everything surrounding this whole fragment. This page reveals that the ICA stripped out critical warnings that would have cast doubt on the Trump-related conclusion. In essence, if that didn't make sense, it misled readers by presenting a contextless and speculative fragment as hard intelligence. This is wild, man. I can't express enough how damaging this report is to the Obama administration, to our intelligence community, to the FBI, to the CIA, to everybody. The fact that they concocted this whole narrative based on a speculative quote, a sentence, folks. Insane. Now, on page 6, what was found was there were plausible alternative explanations for the unclear fragment, but the ICA failed to consider them at all because it didn't push the narrative that they wanted. This shows that even if you assume the fragment was legitimate, let's say that it actually was real, it could easily be interpreted in ways that don't support the ICA's conclusion. That the ICA ignored this undermines the objectivity of the assessment altogether. So look at this. The ICA made no effort to explain how the fragment's ambiguous wording indicated that Putin aspired to elect Trump. The fragment could instead be read that Putin counted on a Trump victory at the Republican convention. Alternative interpretation would not support a judgment that Putin preferred Trump whatsoever, and we'll continue with this trend going forward. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you want more information, folks. This is just part 1 of the video. We'll have a part 2 if you would like. Now, moving on here, what was found was the CIA overruled its own professionals and reinserted the ambiguous fragment into intelligence reporting so that it could be cited in the ICA. I'm going to say that again. The CIA overruled its own professionals in this. This is a bombshell. Professional analysts objected to the use of the fragment, but were overruled by political leadership. It suggests here, folks, the judgment about Putin's intent may have been politically inserted, not analytically justified. Check this out. The DCIA countermanded their decision and ordered that the fragment be included so that it could be cited in the ICA. 2 officers argued with him. "We don't have direct information that Putin wanted to get Trump elected." Exact quote. And we have it highlighted there for you as well. Another quote, "Ideally, they should have eliminated the political judgment because the fragment lacked the clarity needed to support such a significant claim, but they were overruled and the DCIA pushed it anyways." What we have here, moreover, is the ICA misled readers by omitting key warnings about source bias and the uncertainty of how the intelligence was acquired in the first place. This shows, folks, that the ICA not only relied on shaky evidence, but it ignored clear and red flags about bias and motive. That violates basic standards of analytic integrity and would never, ever pass an unbiased intelligence review. The ICA fails to explain the misgivings of CIA professionals that the fragment does not accurately say Putin aspired to help Trump. The source's motivations were in part driven by a strong dislike for Putin and his regime, and the source had an anti-Trump bias. So the source utilized that was fabricated on a sentence pushed this entire thing, and the source itself had an anti-Trump bias and strongly disliked Putin and his regime. Now you're seeing a whole picture being crafted right in front of us. What we have on page 8 here is of a second report that was released only after election on orders from the DCIA. Now, despite being previously rejected by professionals, which we covered, again, the page highlights how political pressure may have been driven the conclusion of weak sources. The decisions here were made after the election. So that's important. After election, when there was political incentive to validate the narrative of Russian support for Trump. Quote, it was only disseminated on December 2016 on DCIA's post-election full review order. The CIA can neither independently vouch for the ultimate source's access to the reported information. That's insane. Furthermore, the ICA cited a third substandard report with unknown sourcing and speculative claims. You're going to love this one. Then misquoted it to make it appear stronger than it was. Now, that might have sounded very confusing here. So let me explain differently. Basically, this demonstrates manipulation of language in the final ICA report, misquoting sources to strengthen a political narrative. In a normal intelligence environment, folks, this would be considered a serious breach of tradecraft, but they didn't anyways. They pushed this and manipulated the language to push a narrative that was never there in the first place, meaning this is very manipulative, it is wrong, and it's dangerous that this is coming from our own intelligence community. Again, the ICA cited a third substandard report with unknown sourcing and speculative claims, then misquoted it, which is crazy. The phrase strongly preferred Republicans does not appear in the raw intelligence report at all. The ultimate source of the information is unknown. They don't even know where it came from, but they pushed it anyways. This is crazy. Then when you go to page 12, what I found was even reliable intelligence contradicted. So now we get into the reliable stuff, and it contradicted the ICA's claims. So they pushed false stuff to fabricate an entire narrative that never existed in the first place on a sentence fragment. And then they had to manipulate and misconstrue a bunch of stuff to push their narrative. But then when you actually had the reliable intelligence, it contradicted their narrative. But the information was ignored or omitted, by the way. This is arguably, I would say, the most damaging revelation in this entire thing. That there was credible intelligence showing Putin didn't favor either candidate and that he saw a strategic advantage regardless of the outcome. And the ICA cherry-picked instead and pushed this whole thing. So look at this. Putin told him he did not care who won the election. Putin had often outlined the weakness of both major candidates. In either case, Russia was strategically placed to maneuver either one. Makes you wonder, well, then why were they pushing this stuff? Why'd they have to fabricate this? Because they wanted to delegitimize Donald Trump and him winning the election. It was all the Russians. The Russians did it. Now, moving on to page 21, I know we're kind of skipping ahead here, but I tried to extract the things that were important that you need to know, is the ICA claimed Russian officials favored Trump based on misrepresentative Russian assessment. But the original document showed no preference for Trump and was misquoted. It's weird how you keep seeing things misquoted, misrepresented, construed, vague. We don't know where the sources are. We came up with this. The intelligence officials, the professionals said, hey, we don't think this should be involved. They were overruled and said, we need to involve this stuff. That doesn't make sense. It's not trustworthy. Nobody would use this ever, but let's do it anyways. They misrepresented the Russian assessment, but the original document showed no preference for Trump and was misquoted. This shows that the ICA twisted the original meaning of intelligence documents to push the narrative that Putin preferred Trump, a serious breach of analytic integrity and objectivity. Look at the ICA falsely cited an analysis of the U.S. elections by Russian experts. On closer examination, it provided additional evidence that Putin didn't care if Trump won. It goes on here that the assessment predicted Trump would lose and that the only way he might win was if he obtained remarkable compromising material on Secretary Clinton. Now, assessed with a high degree of probability that regardless of who won, neither candidate would view Russia as an equal partner. Now, we have here on the page 21 continued is the ICA used misleading language and omitted critical context to suggest Russian leadership still hoped for a Clinton defeat, even though the cited report didn't mention hope at all, meaning they injected a narrative within this once again. And this is a continuing theme through all these pages in this document that they falsely put in information and misled the reader. They misled the intelligence. They lied straight to your faces. And it's right here highlighted for you on each and every page, everything you need to know right there from the horse's mouth. The ICA created an appearance of an active Russian preference for Trump by inserting interpretations that weren't present in the source material themselves. This misleads readers and overstates the evidence. We have a part 2, if you would like, folks, that continues this trend and continues to support with documentation, with right in front of your eyes, with supporting quotes, with supporting narrative, that this whole thing was fabricated. This is very damaging, and I got to know what you think about it in the comment section. If you enjoyed this video and want a part 2, make sure you leave me a comment down below quickly so I know to create a part 2 for you, and we might just create it nonetheless. We do a Bald Brad show each and every morning, 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we bring you a lot of different news. We'd love for you to join us, folks, and I'll see you shortly in a part 2 here on the Bald Brad channel. Appreciate you.